Carroll and Monika Muranyi join us again to share the benevolent and insightful messages of Kryon. Listen in as they explain how the magnetics on the planet are changing, how human consciousness is related to the planetary magnetics, and the 12 multidimensional layers of DNA. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our show. We are happy to bring back some of our favorite guests, Carroll and Monika Muranyi, as they share with us the insightful messages from Kryon. So and Monika have been with us for the last couple of series. They started with the science, mysticism, and beyond. They continued on with the trauma series, and we wanted to get their feedback, particularly for this series on energy, frequency, vibration, and magnetics. We have not talked a lot about magnetics yet in this series, and Kryon is technically a magnetic master. And Lee actually explains what that means when he first came into contact with Kryon and explains how things are actually changing on the planet. So in this episode, we are going to talk about the magnetics on the planet and how they are changing, how the magnetics are directly related to consciousness of the planet and the consciousness of all of humanity. We break down the 12 multidimensional layers of DNA. In book 12 of the Kryon series, that book is dedicated solely on DNA. And I wanted to get his insights around that. I read that book and I felt like it was very important information for us to be able to literally unlock dormant aspects of our DNA that are then able to express themselves and play a role in major changes that are taking place literally in our physiology. They're playing a role literally in unlocking our natural healing ability and opening us up to things like deeper senses of intuition and telepathy and all sorts of these almost spiritual gifts that we've thought about that are very much locked within the DNA. And what is going on right now at this point in time is a lot of shifts that are taking place in those. We've talked to many different guests who have kind of shared that and how frequency and vibration all affect the consciousness of the planet, how they affect DNA. And today we talk more specifically around the magnetics and around these 12 multidimensional layers of DNA. So enjoy this episode. I always find the insights that Lee and Monika share are very, very well received and important pieces to sort of take a look at. One other message that Lee and Monika bring to us towards the end is the importance of actually connecting to joy. Now, this was something that my wife and I were talking about after, because a lot of times when things are going totally crazy or life feels really shitty for a period of time, and then the idea of we're trying to connect to joy, or like when we talk about trying to connect to gratitude, when you feel like you've got very little to actually be grateful for, that can be a hard jump to make sometimes. And so Tay and I were talking about this after, and I feel like particularly at this point in time, when I think about the concept of joy and being able to connect to joy, I think one of the most important things that we can do right now is first, just like Taya says in the episode, we need to first just ask to show me the joy. Where is it? Because for the most part, joy is everywhere, somewhere. We just sometimes get shadowed where we can't see it so clearly. So the first part would be to just ask and then start to be open to seeing where it pops up. And the other part that I think is even the most important part is that, are we actually seeking joy out? Are we connecting to what it is that we really would like? What would bring joy into our lives? Really wholeheartedly, what things fill our heart and make us connect to joy? And then are we doing it? Or are we making a choice not to do that? I think right now it is really important for us to know what brings joy and then act from that inner guidance and not allow an outward guidance to restrict that. So that's something that each person has to individually connect with, because joy for me might be different than somebody else. There may be definitely a lot of rollover, but I think if we can individually connect to what it is, and then can we seek it out and listen to that internal guidance and connect to it, as opposed to listening to another guidance that might be trying to restrict that. Sometimes that could be a partner in your life that doesn't want you to do a certain thing that brings you joy because it makes them upset. Sometimes it can be governing bodies. It can be all sorts of different things. We need to ultimately connect with what is it that brings us joy, and are we able to seek it out ourselves? Listen to that inner guidance and then move in that direction. Or are we allowing other things to get in the way and not do that? That's always comes down to a personal choice. I think right at this point in time, we are all needing to make personal choices that are going to move us closer to joy or that are going to move us farther away from joy. Now, another aspect of being able to connect more fully to joy is when we feel good inside our bodies. So, check out the links below. Check out C60 from Purple Power and check out Ascent Nutrition. If you click the links and use promo code DRLOKEN, you will get 10% off your order for Ascent Nutrition and 15% off your order for C60 from Purple Power. So, Ascent Nutrition has an array of amazing health products. I would check out their vitamin D K2 because almost everybody I'm checking right now is low in vitamin D and markedly low. So when you're looking at vitamin D, the sweet spot in Canada, you want to be around 125 to 175. And the optimal zone, if you are living in the United States, is more like somewhere between about 50 to 70. The numbers are different because the measurements that they use are slightly different. So the numbers look a little different. Almost everybody is deficient in vitamin D when it comes to winter if you live in North America or if you are not living somewhere where there is sun pretty much all year round. So when it comes to be sort of end of fall, wintertime, people need to supplement with vitamin D. Now, it needs to be blended with K2. A lot of people make the mistake where they take high amounts of vitamin D by itself, and then that can cause troubles with other nutrients. So it should be well balanced with vitamin D with the right amount of K2. And you should also be bringing in a little bit of magnesium to balance that out. Check out the Ascent Nutrition Vitamin D K2. It's well balanced and it's an easy absorbable form. And that will start to get your stores back up in the optimal range. And vitamin D plays into literally 2,000 different reactions in the body or more. So it's a big player. It covers tons of different things. Probably the most important one right now is that vitamin D has been associated with decreasing risk for inflammation and cytokine storm. So it's a very important one for your immune system. C60 from Purple Power is literally the world's most potent antioxidant, and it recycles itself. So it can keep scavenging free radicals over and over and over again. You have to remember too that so many things that take place when the body goes awry and that starts to set the stage for disease is cornerstones of things like oxidative stress and inflammation. So you need something in your body that is going to continually work with that. Outside of the work that we do from eating a clean diet and minimizing exposure to harmful EMF and harmful foods and harmful light. And I mean, all of those things that most people are aware of at this point. The other part is to build resilience inside. And taking something like C60 from Purple Power and getting that strong antioxidant support will help to mitigate a lot of potential damage down the road. So I incorporate C60 regularly. It's one of my go-tos for trying to just set the stage for having optimal health. All right, everybody, I hope you enjoyed the show and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Inspire Health Podcast as we continue on with our series on energy, frequency, vibration, and magnetics, the next era of healthcare. And today we are so excited to bring back some of our favorite guests, Lee Carroll and Monika Muranyi. So guys, welcome to the show again. I will have your full bios on there because I think most people that are going to be listening to this are well aware of you guys because you guys have been on. This is the third series that these guys have been back on. And if you're not familiar with them, I mean, you should be. And if you haven't yet, you need to go and check out their work. For us, it's been a absolute godsend, particularly over the past 2 years. The messages that they share from Kryon, which is this amazing benevolent. You know what? I'm going to pass it over and let you guys say just a brief bit around that to intro yourselves, because we've done this and we've done it the last couple times. So you guys can check the previous episodes and get the full gist of it. But let me pass it over to you guys and then we'll get into this series as soon as we can.
Oh, well, thank you, Jason and Tia. We are truly delighted to be back with you again. It's always so lovely and fun to connect with you and your audience. So, Lee, Kryon. It was life-changing for me and no doubt for you.
Well, these days we're doing more than just channeling. We have numbers of things we're doing, including the Circle of 12, which is truly, we call it a healing show. And that's the meditations we present special speakers every single week, and we're doing it for a year, and we're doing it for another year. And it's to help people get through this time that we're in, this pandemic and all the things that are happening. And it's filled with compassion and love. And this is my 32nd year of doing these kinds of things, and we've moved from live audience audiences, which is my specialty for all my life, to streaming. And that's only because we had to, because we can't enjoy that live audiences anymore. And to our surprise, I guess it was a surprise to me, maybe it wasn't to you, but to our surprise, we are reaching more people in 1 week than we did in a year of working before. So along the way, it has given us a plethora of information, and some of it is scientific, and it melds into one particular subject, and that is that we are magnificent, and what's happening on the planet right now that's different than it was perhaps 20 years ago. And also three things: the great shift that we're in, the field, and also the effect on consciousness.
That is going to tie in perfectly with everything that we want to talk with you guys about today. So as people know, this series particularly is on energy, frequency, vibration, magnetics. We've talked lots about energy, frequency, and vibration, but we haven't talked a lot about magnetics. And so we wanted to definitely have you guys on here, given that Kryon is a magnetic master. And we were hoping that we could pass it over to you to maybe give a bit more of an explanation as to what work is Kryon doing, and how does that affect the magnetics, and what's going on with that on the planet right at this time.
Okay, well, we've opened, we want to say a bag of worms. That's not exactly what it is. It's a big subject. And if you'll allow me, I would like to just expand on it from the beginning. When Kryon first arrived 32 years ago, he called himself the Magnetic Master. Now, I wasn't in metaphysics. In fact, I made fun of metaphysics. So in that particular time, I had no idea who I was talking to, and he gave the name very clearly, and he said Magnetic Master very clearly, and I thought I had an angel that I could paste on the refrigerator. So that's you can see where my consciousness was at the time. Come to find out, this is perhaps one of the most profound things that he could have given me. And the reason he called himself a magnetic master is so I would look. What does magnetics have to do with anything when it comes to spirituality, our perceptions of God, on the planet itself? And that was answered. It took years for me to find out what it was. What Kryon did in the early 90s is in book 1. He talked about the magnetic grid starting to shift. Now, he actually said, this is something you all can measure with your compass. He said, this is not esoteric. He said, you will see it shift from the north that measured when you were born to another north within 10 years. Now, it's always been on the move, and so just to let you know, and I'm aware of that, but he said it would move more in 10 years than it had in 100, and it did. And that is something you can look up. Those were the years where it was really on the move. In fact, they were wondering, it was going so fast, whether we would have a compass flip, which has happened in the past, where north became south and south became north. That is something that has happened numbers of times through the eons before we got here on the planet. That's how fast it was moving. Now, how does it, again, how is that relevant? And I'm getting there. We saw, to show you the proof of this, a lot of the animals and birds that migrate were all confused. Whales in particular. These animals were starting to beach themselves, and you might remember that on a regular basis in the 90s. And it was a concern to everybody, and there were a lot of people saving them, and it's so interesting because they'd beach themselves, they'd take boats and pull them off the beach, and they'd swim around and re-beach themselves. They realize now that whales migrate with something in their brains called magnetite, which is magnetics. They have a built-in compass. So do birds. Now we know how migration works, because with a built-in compass, this explains how whales can travel thousands of miles and hit a small island, because they have a built-in navigator. Well, if you can imagine, if north shifts a little bit, even a little bit, 1 degree or so, it may take them into an isthmus or a beach where there wasn't there before the other, because they swim on the coast. And that's what was happening. So this just shows you that the magnetic grid was indeed moving, and you can see this for yourself. Now, why would it matter if the magnetic grid moved? And I still didn't know the answer. Now I do. And I want to approach this carefully. and I want you to see the purpose of it. What if consciousness on the planet, how we think, what we are exposed to, the consciousness that even allows us to think out of the box of where we are, what if that is tied to the magnetic grid? Now, that is a postulate that some will say that's ridiculous. Consciousness is something that is measured by psychiatrists and those who follow, and it's not physics. Well, stand by, because what I'm going to tell you now was the proof that consciousness is correlation with physics, and it is now being measured, consciousness, as energy. Let me give you what happened and why. I will introduce to you two experiments on the planet that were in progress when the planes hit the towers in 2001. And the reason I'm going to give you that is because there was an opportunity when those planes hit those towers. How many people do you think saw that? And the answer is most of the planet. And so what you had was a mass consciousness event at that moment. And these experiments were in progress during that time, and both of them had tremendous reaction that showed something to you. So I'll tell you about one of them first, which is not about the magnetic grid, but it's profoundly involved in consciousness, and it was called the Global Consciousness Project, run by Princeton University and a man named Roger Nelson. And it was a study of randomness and abnormal synchronicity. And what I mean by that, they had random number generators going all the time. And randomness is randomness. You roll dice, you get random things, and you all know that. But if you roll dice and you rolled it 10 times and you got a 6 every time, I think you'd be startled. And you'd know something was up. And that's exactly what happened, because these random number generators, for a moment or two, completely and totally synchronized and did that. They rolled 6s every single time, if you're rolling dice, when the plane hits the tower. And that proved something to them, to Princeton, to Roger Nelson, that indeed he was right to have that experiment, because he was waiting for a consciousness event to see what would happen. And that's what happened. So the only thing that happened was that we had a mass consciousness event. Everybody saw it. There was compassion, there was love, there was fear, all together, and it changed those random number generators. So he was right. So suddenly he saw consciousness could change physics. Now, the big one, and the one that has to do with magnetics, was run by the Global Coherence Initiative. Now, folks, feel free to look both of these things up. Global Consciousness Project, Princeton University, Global Coherence Initiative, run by Heart Math Institute. What they had set up were magnetometers all over the planet, as many as they could at that time. I think it was 11 at the time this happened. And they were measuring the strength of the magnetic field. The strength of the magnetic field. But at the same time, there were satellites in orbit doing the same thing for science, and they were interested too. They weren't interested in what heart math was, but they were interested in the science of measuring the magnetic grid, the strength of it. When the planes hit the towers, immediately the magnetic grid tripled in strength. It was such a cause and effect relationship. But let me tell you, it did it again at the death of Princess Di. That's what we're told. So we're looking at a mass consciousness event that changed the magnetic grid. Are you getting this? So suddenly, what Kryon was saying, we changed the grid, he said, to prepare for something. And the grid is hooked to human consciousness. That showed it. Now we had a correlation. Now we know that consciousness is physics and can be seen as physics. It also gives the idea that perhaps with consciousness we can change physics. And that's been the heart of science fiction. That hasn't been anything here. Also, it lends credibility to when we say consciousness could change your reality. It can work with the field. It's a whole new world today brought to you by science. And that is the Global Coherence Initiative and Global Consciousness Project. Where this has gone to this point is now we understand what Kryon was saying, is that by changing the magnetic grid, you're going to be able to change the consciousness for an event. And that event was called the Great Shift, the Precession of the Equinoxes 2012. we were told originally, you know, in Scripture, you were told in the 2000s that there would be what? Armageddon. You'd be told there would be World War III or whatever. In other words, there was some awareness of something big happening in the 2000s. And you even got in the Scriptures all over the place. Those things didn't happen. They were probably metaphors for something that did. And what did happen is a gradual shift of awareness, perception. I wrote with Jan Tober, a book called The Indigo Children. Some of you don't even know that we wrote that, and you don't attribute Kryon to that or me to that, but we were the ones who introduced the term indigo children to the planet. And that was the forerunners of the kids that would be here today. And that's why so many young people are awakening right now to things they would never have awakened to 20 years ago. I have been presenting now for all these years, and our crowds are 40 and over, and suddenly they're 40 and under. And that is profound. I still can't believe it. And social media and all these things, we have a wonderful, huge young audience who are on board with things they never would have even thought of in the 60s or the 70s or even the 80s. And so these are the things that we're starting to happen, that we're seeing happen. We have the Me Too movement that's happening. How many years would you say that has been going on? Those things, and the hundreds. How many years has it been priests abusing kids? Hundreds. And suddenly, it's on at the tip of our tongues. It's in consciousness. It's being changed. Even the Pope is aware. We're seeing so many changes. And people are not when we say light is being turned on the earth, all you can think about is COVID. And you'll say, well, that doesn't look very enlightening. Even COVID is enlightening because it has stopped the planet. And perhaps we could have had a war, folks. Instead, we had this. And it is something that has changed everything. And Kryon said it's going to result in revelation. It's going to result in dominoes falling. And that's a metaphor for perhaps big pharma and even governments. So there's going to be a price to pay for the inappropriate dysfunction that we're seeing today in some things, and we really are. And if you're not aware of it, you will be. So all of this is turning on the light so we can see the dirt. And that's what Kryon says is happening, and we're starting to see it happen in so many ways. It's a change of consciousness. Now I understand the magnetic master. We are linked to the planet, not just in the magnetic grid. We're part of, we really love and are part of the, I would say, the phenomenon of earth keepers. And you probably have heard of these folks. And they really are an attempt to bring us back to the planet, to show what the indigenous knew. And we're also aware the indigenous knew all of these things. I mean, you're in an area right now where the Maya are. They knew it. That it was their calendar that everybody talks about at 2012. They knew about the consciousness shift that was coming. They knew about the precession of the equinoxes. So there's a lot of things that the indigenous were aware of and knew and told us about. The Hopi did too, that we are now experiencing. So it's our time to revisit, I think, the wisdom of the ancients, a new concept in science that consciousness is connected to the planet more than just the magnetic grid. And then there's the question, and I won't go into it now because I'm going to turn it back to you, but the question about magnetics and healing. Because, hey, that's a whole other subject.
Well, that actually does follow right into my next question anyways, was when we talk about magnetics, I wanted to know how the magnetics plays into consciousness, particularly like planetary consciousness and human consciousness, but also as well as how does that affect health?
Sure, and just briefly, I'll answer that in a way because I'm not a doctor or a chemist, but we know that if you take a look at all of our the way cells work in the body, there's a lot of magnetics there. There truly is, and that's the only way certain things can work. There's multidimensionality in our cellular structure, therefore we have quantum biologists, and there is some magnetics, even in DNA. We say there are some magnetics, and they've acknowledged that. So if you think about that, there would have to be some kind of magnetic fields that could help us in healing. There are many products which are on the market which people have purchased, including magnetic bracelets and rings and blankets and all. It's a start. But there is a channel or two or three or four from Kryon that admonishes us to be careful, because magnetics can indeed change cellular structure. They can feel good and they can even heal, but they're like drugs. And I mean by that, what you do is you put them on you until you're balanced, and then you take them off, because we balance automatically. We got a great system. Bruce Lipton will tell you about that, and it does what it does well. If it gets out of balance and you use the magnetics to help balance it in, we say, then take it off. Don't sleep under a magnetic blanket all your life, because here's sobering. What Kryon says, that magnetics can heal you, can also create a tumor if you're not careful. So we're headed for something in the future that Kryon calls designer magnetics, when we can actually design the magnetic field for the biological symptom. Right now, we're just using static magnets all over something and putting it on us. That's pretty basic, and even it works and it's been proven to work for a while. So we see that there are some cause and effect relationships. So there's something there, but it's got to be a little more elegant than it is right now.
And if I can also interrupt and add to what Lee was saying, because I get so passionate about the magnetic grid and the interface with our Earth. And for those who don't know, our Earth is a living, breathing, sentient being. And Kryon has channeled that we have 3 main energy grids of the Earth. The magnetic grid is the engine of communication. It's the engine of communication. And then we have, interfacing with that, the crystalline grid, which Kryon describes as an esoteric grid that stores and remembers human conscious energy and action. And then you have the cave of creation. I know these are very complex terms, but we also have the Gaia grid. Now, Lee mentioned magnetics can interfere with the body. Is there any evidence of this on our planet? Well, let me ask you a question. Are there different magnetics that happen on our planet? And the answer is yes. And there are certain places on the planet where you go where instruments like the compass that use the magnetics to measure go haywire. I'm talking about places like the Bermuda Triangle. What is the reason for that? What causes this interference and these anomalies in the magnetics in pockets that are on the planet? And so Kryon has given information that there is an overlay of the crystalline and the magnetics and the Gaia grid, where in some cases it amplifies that energy. And you can get areas that are called like nodes on the planet. Then there's other areas where it cancels out each other and it's a void. It's called a null in the planet. And that is what Kryon says you can go and measure it with magnetics and it will show those anomalies. One of the things that Kryon said as well is that in Lourdes, in France, there is an area known for the water that comes out and it heals people. There are people that will go to be in that water, bathe in that water, and they have health issues that completely disappear. And I remember in one of the channels from Kryon that described the magnetics in that area where the water comes out has been enhanced by the magnetics, and it has indeed creating healing water. So there's many examples on our planet just in looking at the magnetics, which shows a direct correlation of health and wellness or even imbalance. People that spend time at the North and the South poles, there is a weakness of the magnetic field there, and they do develop health complications if they spend too much time in that area. So I wanted to just share those other aspects of the interface between the connection we have with the planet, with the magnetics and human consciousness, and how it can affect our physical bodies as well. Did you want to add to that, Lee?
No?
No?
No, that was very good. No, actually, that's totally accurate.
I think that's a really important point that you brought up, Monica. And I actually came across your sharing maybe a few months ago with regards to the nulls and nodes. So I'll go back and find that on a website. I know Dr. Todd had also shared that information of yours. So with the audience, I will share that link and they can go and what's interesting is you actually laid out the nodes and the nulls directly on the world map. So it's really interesting to be able to see where those are located around the world.
Yes, and what T is referring to is 12 major nodes and nulls on the planet. But I do want to emphasize that there are many nodes and nulls, portals, vortices, vortexes all over the planet. So that link that T is giving you represents 12 major ones that relates specifically to our creation story and also the strong connections with Indigenous communities. But you won't find places on that list like Sedona, which is known for its vortexes and vortices and portals. So you will have in your own area your own connection with an energy that is there, and just feel into it, whether that could be a node or a null or a portal or a vortex. And Kryon also describes there's pockets on our planet that's known as ascended land, where it is so pure. There is a purity in those ascended lands that will never change. And it's to do with the symmetry on the planet and having those pockets there that are always in ascension status. Always in ascension status. And Lee and I have been so privileged to be in a place called the Elqui Valley, or Valle de la Elqui in Chile, which is ascended land. And people go there and have mystical experiences. So there is that posturing that happens on the land that I would call it creates a thinness in the veil between us and a multi-dimensional reality. There's another area Lee and I travelled to in the Cathar country in France. And it was the same message from Kryon, that there is a thinness in the veil that makes it so easy to connect with the multi-dimensional reality in that location. And it is why those known as the Cathars would continue coming back to that land, even though they would be persecuted or face torment or even death. Why would you choose to keep coming back to that land when they could be in safe harbour in another area somewhere else? Because they couldn't get that same connection that's provided in that land. So there are many beautiful mysteries that we're slowly beginning to rediscover, and some of these things is like what Lee said, that ancient Indigenous have always had access to.
That's beautiful, Monica. And I mean, I feel like even since we've been out here, we've come across some areas in Mexico here where I feel like we've come across some areas that have that thinness in the veil. Even out in Canada, you know, there were certain places we would go hiking that at specific mountain peaks that we'd get to, we would sit. Even as I think about it, it gives me goosebumps because it would just feel different. There would feel like a different ease of connection, or as you speak about, sort of a multidimensionality. So what beautiful places to even like hold retreats in those types of areas so people can have a even heightened experience.
Yes, absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
have a question for you. So, Lee, you were speaking earlier about basically the inevitable connection between human consciousness and the planetary consciousness. And Monica, when you were speaking of the nodes and nulls and how we basically have certain experiences in different pockets around the world as we travel, how do the chakras correspond with the nodes and the nulls, would you say?
Are you asking
Then,
about body chakras?
yes, body chakras within the
Yeah.
throughout the meridians of the human body.
That's a great question. I really don't have an answer for because it's not something Cryon's really talked about.
Kryon has not talked about that
Mm.
specific thing, but you know that there has to be a reaction. Anytime we go to one of these areas that Monica has talked about, and you feel something amazing, you know that something is happening with the chakra system. It has to, because that's linked to everything. If somebody goes someplace where there's a cure, that has to be working on certain particular chakras. If somebody goes where there's a heart connection, that's another chakra. If somebody goes where they're going to feel a tremendous enlightenment, that's going to be the crown or above. We believe there's a chakra even above the crown. So there has to be effects. Now, there are probably those listening right now who would say, well, yeah, and they're written a book on it. So, and we have not. So Kryon has not addressed that one, but there has to be an effect on our chakras, and that's probably something that is very well known and documented.
Hmm. Well, and I also think with the chakras, I mean, Kryon speaks a lot about consciousness. A lot of that work comes up. And even when you think about the different chakras go through different sort of, each one has a specific theme. So even through different themes, there's sort of a transcendence that can take place that usually is related to a shift in consciousness. And so when I think about the work that Kryon shares and the aspects around consciousness and multidimensionality, it's like when you do have those shift in consciousness, I think that you then are able to transcend some of those patterns and the emotions and stuff like that that get sort of held within some of those different chakras too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree totally with that.
Mm.
The study of chakras is so related, I think, to the study of consciousness, that you could have the same kinds of things that you would relate in biodecoding or any of these things, and subconscious stories that stick, and things that have happened in the past that stick. It's all related to the chakra system as well, because we have a tremendous integration in the body. Those who study, for instance, just one thing in the body and are experts in it will also tell you that this is just one of the things that's interrelated to other things. It's all there, and the chakra system is such a basic, ancient way of looking at the body that it all has to relate. Especially that which you've just said, and that we've seen in so many of our guests, where they talk about rewriting and reframing certain things that you've learned that stick in, that have to be, I would say, just reframed, and I said that, but so that you come out in a certain way. I like to see, I have a vision, I had a dream once, and Kryon gave it to me, where the chakra, the chakra colors, and they're very, very well known, and there's so many graphics that will have, you can see the chakra colors, and I see them, a dream once where as you solve certain things, each one glowed. And so they were all involved in a way, or they pulsed, or whatever, like runway lights, when you solved some problems. And I think it's almost like a reboot sometimes of the whole chakra system.
That's wonderful. I really like that, and I'm sure that's exactly what probably would go on if you could actually see it
Yeah,
or measure it. When you come
yeah,
to certain solutions through problems,
yeah,
it's like they turn on or they spin in a certain way.
yeah.
The other thing I wanted to connect with and get some insights around was particularly around the book 12 here. and which is all about the 12 layers of DNA. And one thing that Kryon speaks about is the multidimensionality aspect of DNA. I'm wondering if you can share a little bit around that concept with the audience. And then I have a few different questions kind of tied into those, but I'd love to hear that part first.
Sure. You know, it's actually veiled information even in that book. The 12 layers of DNA is completely and totally an esoteric study. It has nothing to do with the chemistry of DNA, even though we have a researcher who has given the forward to it, which is Dr. Todd. And Kryon goes into the spirituality, we'll say, of what is in your DNA. And he has 12 layers. Each one of them has a name of God in Hebrew. Now that's important just as a metaphoric saying to say that this has been with us for a very long time. It has ancient meanings, and it's given the Hebrew language so that one of the person who was involved in the book could give the translation, who is a Hebrew. And so that's basically a metaphor in itself, saying it's ancient information and it's always been there. And what Kryon has said about those 12 layers, in every single one of them, he gives the fact that it is a multi-dimensional layer. I asked Dr. Todd Ovakaitis, who is our go-to guy when it comes to DNA, because he is a DNA researcher. This is what he's done all his life. He has some profound studies and some profound solutions to health, and it all centers around DNA. And the reason I asked him to give the foreword for that book is because I wanted him to chime in on, is it a multidimensional chemistry or not? And he was saying it has to be. And so do quantum biologists who are studying it. And there's been some wonderful experiments that you can read about. Vladimir Papoinin, I think, was one of the first ones, a Russian, who did some experiments that were quantum in DNA and discovered some really amazing things that DNA did in a flask, in a jar, that had to do with quantumness. And that was just the beginning of our understanding. Maybe, just maybe, our chemistry is a bit multidimensional, more than the 3D thing we thought. Allopathic medicine is 3D, 4D. It deals with action and reaction, and it's not very good at it. And what I mean by that, and even today, it's like if you've ever played whack-a-mole, and that's where you pound on one and another one pops up. Every single time you have a change in chemistry on our body, you push something with another chemical, something else pops up. And that's called side effects. And everything does that. You cannot change the balance of the human body, even an aspirin, without something else happening. And they know that. And drug companies know that and all. They try and they list the side effects, and that's well known. It doesn't happen with homeopathy. And that, here we are with with that aspect. That, I would say, is more of a multidimensional solution, because you're giving the body's multidimensional field an instruction set that it then performs on its own with perfect balance. Consciousness is like consciousness homeopathy. So homeopathy and even consciousness changing health could not happen unless chemistry was also multidimensional. Think about it. Most people have not put this together in this fashion. So homeopathy itself would not work. Consciousness would not work unless the body had some kind of a multidimensional complement that allowed for it. And so this is where we get into some really cool stuff. I would expect quantum biologists to come forward at some point and say, okay, here's what we've discovered about the dimensionality of DNA and how it works and what it means to have a multidimensional body. And someday that will be acknowledged to the point where they may have multidimensional medicine. Now, I want you to think, turn the page or not. Did you know that if you were to list multidimensional things that physicists know are multidimensional, one of them is gravity. Nobody understands gravity. It has to be multidimensional a certain way. The other one is magnetics. So the magnetic field itself has other dimensions in it. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. The two things that are still a mystery in physics is magnetics and gravity. They keep trying to find waves of gravity, and every time they discover it, some other physicist says, doesn't work, that's not it. So they really haven't pinned down what makes gravity. It's related to magnetics. Magnetics itself, a magnet. Why? How? And what are the aspects of it? They realize they haven't figured that out completely either. And so we have, I believe, a magnetic, that's why magnetics, the body responds to magnetics. We have things in our body that are multidimensional, ready to respond to multidimensional healing processes, perhaps some we haven't found yet.
And I love, Lee, that 12 layers of DNA, as you mentioned, it's an esoteric study of the mastery within, but I love the analogy of an iceberg. So everyone knows when you see an iceberg, you're only seeing the tip above the water surface, and underneath is a huge block of ice that you cannot even see. And so the analogy is that the chemistry that we see and measure, and the Human Genome Project that found all of those thousands of genes, represents the tip of the iceberg that we can see. And for years they were looking at junk DNA. 97% of DNA was unknown, a mystery, and it was called junk DNA. Well, guess what? That junk DNA they've now discovered from linguists are the instruction sets for the genes. The junk DNA is the instruction sets for the genes. And so what are the instructions? They come from a signal, the environment, and everything Lee talked about. So those 12 layers of DNA, they're all in the iceberg that is beneath the water that you can't see, and it's the subtle energy fields. And it's also why things like energy medicine can work, Reiki, and all those other practices that work in that subtle energy field. And I want to also mention, in my home country of Australia, we have a lineage of the Aboriginals that have been living in the moment for 40,000 years. And the Anangu that are in the centre of Australia, they have their healers, they call them the Nunkari, and they do healing through spirit, body and mind. And they work out what is wrong with the spirit to fix the body. And what's amazing and beautiful to see unfolding now is that there are some hospitals where the Nunkari are actually being invited to come in and to help those patients that modern medicine don't seem to be able to help with, and they're getting amazing results. And Lee and I recently did a series on the 12 layers of DNA, and I don't remember the name of it. Lee, do you remember where people can look that up?
It's on cryonmasters.com.
That's right.
And I think it's something about DNA.
12 layers of DNA.
Yeah, it's the titles come from our team, not from us, and so we don't know what it is.
We actually did an online course
Yeah.
for people based on that book, and
So it's obvious. When you go to cryonmasters.com and look at our videos.
yeah, and we had Ilan with us to do the Hebrew pronunciations, because neither Lee or I we're going to attempt
I think it's called
that.
the 12 layers of DNA.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a clever title.
We will confirm that, and we will have that below this video for the audience who's interested.
Yeah, I found the work in that book. That's this one here. I really enjoyed that a lot from my perspective too. I mean, I know there's a multidimensionality to healing. I mean, I don't think you can be a clinician long enough and not realize that healing is not a linear pathway for the vast majority of people. It just isn't. And it doesn't always, and if it were, then it would work the same way almost all the time with everything. It just doesn't. And when I've seen the most profound healings, both in my life as well as in patients' life, it is when they connect to something beyond just the mere physical. Nothing wrong with the physical, that might be a part of it, but it's not the only piece. And, when you start to get these other aspects, and I've always found it's often tied with consciousness. You create shift in consciousness that open you to a larger field, and that's where the solutions start to present themselves, however they're going to. So when I was going through the work in this book, it was very much food for my soul, I think. I resonated with a lot of truth for me, and it gets you excited about your own ability to unlock the natural innate healing capacity within your body. That's how I kind of think of it. And it's not only healing, but it's like everything, because I would say it's sort of the essence of a lot of the layers. And you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I would say at the heart of it, it's really developing a deeper, stronger connection to source, to God, to however you want to connect to that. But it's through that connection that then the DNA itself starts to activate, and it knows what's in your highest good. It's not like you can kind of linearly figure out which piece you want to work with. It's just, if you can connect, if you can shift in consciousness, do these different things, then that process allows a lot of the activation to take place.
I want to ask everybody a question, and then just go through a process with me of logic. And that would be this. Let's talk about placebos. Now, the placebo effect is when someone takes a sugar-coated pill, thinks they're going to get well, and gets well. Now, it's not very popular with the drug companies because it ruins their data, and they have to keep testing because of the placebo effect. What if we were to study the placebo effect? And there are those now that are studying it. So think for a moment and use your logic. What would cause this? So you take the sugar-coated pill, and your expectations say that this is what is going to cure, let's say, my migraine. All right? So someone comes to you and says, we have got a new drug for the migraine. We're testing it. It's testing really great, and we want you to be part of this test group. Please take this pill. You take the pill, the migraine goes away. Maybe you probably have migraines for years and years, and they're gone. And you're jumping up and down and doing the happy dance and all that stuff because you've been cured. And the migraines never come back. Down the line, somebody in the laboratory has realized you've taken a sugar-coated pill. Now, they don't tell you that, and they won't. But that's what has happened. Question, how? And the answer is, expectations of your consciousness went right into your cellular structure. You talked to your cells at some level that said, this is going to cure the migraines. And your cellular structure took over and did it. This is the magnificence of the human body that will balance itself if consciousness is committed to it. You believed it would help. It not only helped, it cured. And this happens every day, over and over. And I stand here saying that we ought to be studying that one. And we ought to be developing the process of how it occurred, why it occurred, and develop it so that we can all use that process. And I think we all know. And the study truly shows us that what we expect we can create. And that truly is creating your own reality with your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, incredibly powerful. And I think Kryon even mentioned in one of the books that intent represents one of the most powerful forces on the planet. Mm-hmm. And it changes your DNA as well as provides for co-creation. Mm-hmm. So when we talk to the Goldmans that I know you guys have done work with and stuff too, I love the work that they're doing. And Jonathan Goldman, a long time back, said intent plus frequency equals healing. And we've actually talked to several guests, including them. We've talked to JJ Hurtak and Desiree Hurtak. And again, the intent seems to be a cornerstone for any kind of shift, whether that's around healing or manifesting anything in your life. Focused intent seems to be one of the most powerful things that we can really cultivate in order to create big change in our world.
Yeah, we even say it's cognized intent. There's many layers and kinds of intent, according to Kryon, but he continually used the word focused is for Kryon pure. So pure intent. Intent can be, I intend to jump into the lake. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I'll try this, I'll try that. I'll jump tomorrow, or I'll pretend I'm jumping, or I'll. But when you jump, you and I both know that gravity is going to take you right into the lake. So that would be pure intent. It's cognized. In other words, it's your belief. So your intent becomes your reality, and that's a process that we're learning to do.
I wanted to bring up a really beautiful message that I read in, Monica, your book, actually, The Women of Lemuria. And you had spoken of the important role that we each individually play within the collective shift that's taking place at any point in history. But specifically now, this stood out in my mind because oftentimes it may come up that certain people in the population are focused on creating a particular movement, especially at this point in humanity's history. And they believe that if your focus is not the same as their focus, then you're basically wasting your energy. And so what you brought up within the book was you spoke of conflict of comparison and conflict of personality, that this will get into, but you specifically spoke about the different personalities that each of us have and how that actually helps the collective. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
I would love to, and for sure, I have been guilty of looking at what others do and think, how on earth is that helping the planet? Enter Kryon. Kryon, the sage, the wisdom from beyond the veil, to help little old Monica, who is going, how on earth is that helping the planet? So there was a beautiful channel from Kryon. It was given in Phoenix, Arizona. I can't remember the year, but it was 5 in a circle. And Kryon described that we have 5 different types of people on the planet and went through the attributes of them. So number 1 are those who are here on a mission, and they are coming to really do that work and bring that mission to the planet. And definitely Lee is a number 1. They will never retire. They will keep on working because it feeds their soul and it consumes almost 24/7 of their day. Then we have another group that Kryon called number 2, which are the healers. And obviously the number 1s need the number 2s because they overwork themselves and they don't take a break and they need to get tuned up every now and then. So we have the healers of the planet, and very important role. Then Kryon talked about number 3 and described them as the meditation warriors of the planet. These are serious meditators, often could be lifetimes of being a monk, and will sit in meditation, deep meditation. And often those meditations are to ease suffering on the planet or to bring compassion on the planet. Then we had number 4, which are, 4 is obviously a Gaia Earth number. These are the tree huggers, the ones that are out there defending the rights of animals and looking after the planet and the environment. And definitely in my past role as a ranger in the national parks, defender of environment, I thought that humanity was abhorrent and horrible and we just need to get rid of the people on the planet and then we're all going to be fine. I didn't realize that there's this deep connection between the earth, and the earth is here in support of our journey, our experience of our path to ascension. It's here in that support role, and such a loving partnership that there is. And then there was number 5. And number 5 were those described as what Kryon called those who anchor energy wherever they go. They are never going to write a book. They're never going to go on stage. They don't need to do the meditation warrior. And they can still be connected to the earth, but without having to go on a cause or a mission. They're the people you will meet in line at the grocery store who will simply ask you, how was your day? And smile at you and completely open your heart just by their very presence. There's nothing they have to do. It's just what they are and how they be and anchor the energy. And the point that Kryon was making is that we are sometimes a meld of one of those fives. We can have shades of number 1 and shades of number 4, or we can have a little bit of all of them. And so that message from Kryon really shows the beauty of the uniqueness of every single person on the planet, and how collectively we are making change. Every day there is a change happening on this planet. You cannot stop it. Tomorrow will be the next change. Just like in your body, every day there is cell growth, there is things changing. Even if you think nothing is changing, every day something in your body is taking place. Same as our planet collectively. Every day, every moment, something is taking place. And so the role of each person is so precious, so unique, and hopefully that dispels the conflict of comparison that we have. That's a term I learned through biological decoding and by reprogramming. We often come in and the first thing we do is compare ourselves to everyone else. And in fact, I will confess a little secret here. When Lee Carroll first started to channel Kryon, it wasn't what you see today. It was first a love wash, and it began as automatic writing. And Lee, I think you said, I remember you saying to me one time, oh, why should I even bother writing a Kryon book when there are so many other Kryon books on the shelf? So that's the conflict of comparison.
It was not Kryon books, other metaphysical books.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Why should I bother writing a Kryon book if there's other metaphysical books for people to get to?
Yeah, comparison conflict.
A comparison conflict.
Why should I write a
bother?
book when there's so many out there already? You know, why just add to the collection, you know?
Yes, exactly. So please embrace your own uniqueness, your own values, your own gifts, your own talents, and love you for the magnificence that you are.
God, what a beautiful message to finish off with. I'm not sure if you can hear the birds in the back.
Yes, I can hear them. I love
They're
it.
enjoying that too, I think.
Lovely.
It's such an important message, though, because it is that, and even when you last said celebrating your own uniqueness, you know, that message has come up before as one of the most powerful things that we can actually all do at this time, and celebrate our own uniqueness, like really own it and bring it to the forefront. I know one thing that we often encourage people is don't follow what we do or what somebody else does, but just do the best you can to really authentically connect to what your own true self is really guiding you to, and then do the best you can to live from that place, and catch maybe when you're not, and then make, you know, you try to make arrangements like we do every day, is try and do a little bit better the next day if we fall off. I think really if we're doing that, we're ultimately putting more benefit into the planet, into humanity than not. Guys, thank you so much for joining us again. I know we've come up on time here. Any last messages you'd like to share with the audience before we pass over to where people can learn more about your work?
I think find your joy and do that. That's my real main message. What is it that you value? What do you enjoy spending your time on? And have that intent to create the day you want to live exactly in the way that it brings you the most joy.
We need to laugh more. We need to laugh at ourselves more. We need to get over ourselves. And the way we do that is by laughing. And so watch a comedy movie or something that makes you
at
joyful.
least once a day.
At least, yeah. Honestly, we have, medicine has discovered that laughter and joy actually changes the chemistry. You feel more open, and it's a very healing energy. We got to do it more.
You know what it is? I just wanted to mention this because it was such a poignant and important pivotal time in my own life. I had gone through years and years of depression, well over 2 decades. And I reached a point I turned to various modalities. I turned to Western psychology, philosophy. I turned to then Eastern philosophy and psychology, including yoga, meditation, and some of the ancient religions from the East to basically try to figure out this art of living, how to live a more joyful life. But I remember there was a point in my life where within my meditation, I said, okay, I'm making a commitment now within my sitting meditation, within my walking meditation, within what I focus in on, to just ask the question, where is the joy? Where is the joy? Where is the joy? And that question for me was absolutely pivotal, because all of a sudden joy started popping up in my life in ways that I couldn't have imagined. But it was, looking at the pattern, the intricate, beautiful pattern on a leaf or within a flower, or the way the sun's warmth felt on my cheek, or the wind blew through my hair, like very simple things that I started to notice through my day as I was searching and seeking joy. But I'm so glad you said that, because even the platform that Jason and I have created to give people the experiential feeling of all these information that we're sharing with everyone is Adventures in Joy. And we feel that once you do connect with joy, it all of a sudden awakens you to the beauty within life that is innately available within all of life. And the depression and the anxiety and all these things that were constant before just start to almost like old garments. You can just lay them to the ground and you can be done with it. And so thank you for bringing that up, because joy is definitely has been a huge tool within our life. And we hope that folks can focus on that. And even if it's asking a question, where is the joy? Where's the feeling of joy? To just start to remind themselves as to where to feel it and find it.
Guys, it's always a joy to speak with you.
Yes.
And thank you so much for your time. Where can we send people to learn the most about your work and any upcoming workshops or online trainings?
Well, the best place to find all of our workshops and online events is cryonmasters.com. That's cryonmasters.com. And another valuable place is cryon.com, which has loads of free audios. And I'll give you a shortcut to go straight to those audios, cryon.com/free audio. So you can also check out Lee's YouTube channel, which is Kryon Lee Carroll, and you'll be able to participate in those Circle of 12 experiences that Kryon mentioned earlier. So that's it from us. Have a beautiful rest of your week, day, year, and mwah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, guys.